series on communication, and we spent 1 week talking about how to listen well. Listening attentively, actively, empathetically, prayerfully. We spent last week talking about how we need to engage our minds before we engage our mouth, and the consequences of not doing so. And this week, we're actually going to talk about responding with wisdom. It actually is okay sometimes to actually say something, so I want you to know that. So the first verse is right here. Proverbs 20:15. Wise speech is the most precious jewel. Isn't that great? Wise speech is the most precious jewel. Proverbs 15:23 says, a person finds joy in giving an apt reply. And how good is a timely word. In Proverbs 23 it says, it's one's honor to avoid strife, but every fool is quick to quarrel. Proverbs 25:11 says, words spoken at the right time are like gold apples in a silver setting. I have one more that I'm going to add to the list, and that's from Proverbs 8, and beginning in verse 6, where we read, listen, for I have trustworthy things to say. This is wisdom speaking. I open my lips to speak what is right. My mouth speaks what is true. For my lips detest wickedness. All the words of my mouth are just. None of them is crooked or perverse. To the discerning, all of them are right. They are upright to those who have found knowledge. Choose my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her. Responding with wisdom. When I was growing up, there was a kid on our bus. His name was Bart. And Bart was like a first grader when he first started riding the bus. And he had an older sister whose name was Anita. And Anita was probably about 10 years older than Bart. So she was significantly older than him. And she was apparently used to kind of bossing him around. And there was a phrase that we heard every day on the bus, at least 2 or 3 times. Sometimes more. Maybe up to 5 or 6 or 10, I don't know. But a lot of times every day, because Bart would always get himself into trouble. Sometimes it was what he was saying, and sometimes it was doing what he was doing, and sometimes just because he wouldn't sit down and he was messing around with things. But from the back of the bus, we repeatedly heard these words come from Anita. Bart, sit down, shut up, and leave it alone. Sit down, shut up, and leave it alone. Every day, numerous times during the day on that bus ride, we would hear these words. So much so that they are firmly implanted in my memory. I will never forget these words that were given by this older sister to the younger Bart. Sit down, shut up, and leave it alone. When I was thinking about where we're at in this series, if you just heard the first 2 messages that I've given you, you probably get the impression that that's what you should do. Just sit down, shut up, and leave it alone. This is the key to communication. Well, that's not completely true, although there are times where that's pretty good advice for us. We need to be people who use our words wisely, which is the point of all these texts that we've been looking at in Proverbs. The writer of Proverbs puts a premium on using the right words at the right time and not overusing words, but when we do have the opportunity to use them well. So it's more than just shutting up and sitting down and leaving it alone. So let's take a look at some of these proverbs that are given to us about wise and apt and timely speech. So when you're given the opportunity now, you have listened. You've listened attentively. You've put down your cell phone. You're not sitting at your computer. You're not watching TV, but you're having a conversation with someone. And for some of you, that's a pretty big step right there. to sit and look at someone else and have a face-to-face conversation. It's something we're losing in our day, and we don't want to ever lose it. The ability to talk at a deep level and to genuinely care about what that other person is saying, and hearing their stories and getting to know them at a deep level. Some of the best times I've spent in life have just been one-on-one conversations or small group conversations with people who come from diverse backgrounds, or who maybe some older saints that have walked with the Lord, and the lessons and the wisdom that they have. There is so much to be learned from listening. So, the first, where we're going to start here is Proverbs 15:23, I think. An appropriate word. When you're given the opportunity to speak, the proverb writer suggests to us that we should speak appropriate words. Speak appropriate words. There are some words that are given at just the right time, in just the right way, so that they're received by the person that you're speaking to. So 15:23, a person finds joy in giving an apt reply, the writer says. You can find joy by just having the right words to say at just the right time. Have you ever been there? Have you ever had just the right words to say that solved somebody's problem? It's wonderful when that happens. Or maybe let's turn around the other way. Have you ever had someone who spoke truth into your life? Words have power. Life and death, this writer says, are in the tongue. The power of life and death. I mean, the most incredible power is found in our tongues. The ability either to destroy and ruin our lives or other people's lives, or to build up and encourage and strengthen and guide other people into truth. Incredible potential is found in our tongue. So having just the right word at the right time, that ought to bring you great joy. And it ought to be something that we're always looking forward to. One commentator who looks at this verse says that the proverb is important in establishing the nature of truth in Proverbs. There's not a single right answer that's always appropriate. It's a joy to give a helpful answer to a problem, but it must be spoken in a timely manner. So, in this particular case, it is the apt word. I think about my own life. There have been some people who've been able to speak into my life in a way that really made a difference. And there's a couple of them that come to mind especially. There was a pastor that I worked for in the first two churches that I ministered in. And I started out as a music minister in this church. Okay, I directed choirs. I had a kids choir, an adult choir, I had a youth choir. That's where I started. And he would watch me work and do things and talk to me. And after a while he said, you know what? I think you have a gift of teaching. You ought to try teaching a Sunday school class. And so he gave me a Sunday school class to teach. And guess what? He was right. There was my gift. And a little bit later, it didn't take very, and he said, you know what? I think you might have a gift of preaching. And he began to open up the pulpit and give me opportunities to preach. And he had this ability to see gifts in people before they saw them. It wasn't just me. He had an unusual giftedness of wisdom and discernment, and the ability to see things in people and say, you know what? Why don't you try this? Because you might be good at that. Oh, what a wonderful and what an apt and timely thing it is to have someone who can speak that kind of truth into your life. I see something in you. I want to just affirm that in you. I want to challenge you with that. A little bit later in life, I had a district superintendent by the name of Dr. Keith Bailey. Wonderful, godly man. One of the best preachers I've ever heard in all my life, literally. Just incredible preacher. And he was our district superintendent, and our church in Cincinnati was his home church. He was gone a lot because he had 50-some churches to attend to. I noticed something, that every time that I was scheduled to preach, Dr. Bailey was there. And that drove me crazy at first because I knew how good a preacher he was. And I was just a young guy, didn't know any better. I was just doing the best I knew how to do. And after about a year of this happening on a pretty regular basis, he came and spoke something to me. He said, you know what? He says, I see giftedness in your preaching. He says, you need to find a place where you can preach on a regular basis. And that was the first time I thought about that. said, okay, well, let me pray about that. And he let me, and it didn't take him very long. A couple months later, he says, you know what? There's a church just up the road here, looking for a pastor. I think you'd be the guy for that church. He spoke these words, and it altered my course. I was enjoying what I was doing as a music and youth pastor in that particular church. Getting to preach about once a month, and that's what I was enjoying. I was good. Working with a pastor I respected and had a great relationship with. And he said, maybe you should think about finding a church where you can preach more often. He was speaking wisdom into my life. An apt and timely word that altered the course of my life. There have been others in my life. There have been times where Malou has spoken into my life. And she said, I think you should try this, or you should do this, or maybe we need to do this. There's often something, our spouse has understanding of us, can see things in us that's very important to us. Being able to speak an apt word, an appropriate word at just the right time is a beautiful and a wonderful thing. It's something that ought to bring us great joy. Proverbs 27:9 says, perfume and incense bring joy to the heart, and the pleasantness of a friend springs from their heartful advice. Don't you like that? Heartfelt advice. Do you have friends like that in your life who can speak words of wisdom into your life? Heartfelt. It's not that they're just like to tell you what to do. There's some of those people out there too. You can stay away from those people. But those that really have you in their heart, who really care about you, who really want to know what's going on in your life and legitimately want to speak truth into your life. You should have those kind of people in your life, because it will make a difference in the way that you live. And you ought to aspire to become a person who always has an apt word. What kind of words are apt? Well, it could be many things. What kind of things are appropriate? Often they're words of encouragement. Hebrews tells us to have a word of encouragement every day. We need encouragement every day. And how true it is. Life is tough. We need somebody to come alongside of us and speak a word of encouragement. We need people who can speak hope into our lives. We feel hopeless sometimes. We get discouraged. And we need people that are going to raise the level of hope so it starts bubbling up and overflowing in our lives and getting out on everybody else. We need people who are able to speak with wisdom and know the Word of God and know the principles and can hear from Him and can speak into our lives and say, I've been praying for you. And I just sense that maybe what the Lord's saying is this. Now we're going to talk about how to handle that in a little bit, but you need people around you who speak words of wisdom and guidance and discernment, and sometimes words of correction. Sometimes even rebuking words. Sometimes that's the appropriate word. Sometimes somebody needs to tell you something that you don't want to hear. Remember David? When the prophet Nathan stood up and he started telling the story about this guy, and you are the man. Stuck his finger in his nose. You're the person I'm talking about here. He confronted King David with that kind of boldness about his sin. And we need people like that sometimes, who can put the finger in our nose and say, you know what? You need to change what you're doing. Now be careful about that ministry. There are some who get a little carried away with that think they have the gift of rebuking and correction, so be careful of it. But if the Lord puts it on your heart, if He speaks to you, there are times when He may use you to speak a difficult word to people. So it's not just the encouraging word. Sometimes it's the hard word that somebody needs to hear. But in any case, being led by the Lord, led by the Spirit, knowing what His wisdom is, knowing His truth, there's something about having people that can speak apt words. Now, when it comes to your marriage, there are some times where what you need to say to your spouse is the right time. And sometimes when it's not the right time. And there are some things that you might be thinking that may be appropriate sometime, but this isn't the time. Do you know what I'm talking about? Especially this is true with one of you is a little upset with the other person, and the temperature has arisen a good deal. This is probably not the time to deal with that. You have to find the right time and the appropriate words to speak. So how do we do this? How do we know what to do? I think we have to know each other deeply. And that requires time and attention. Especially in a marriage relationship, if we're going to speak truth to each other, or in a family relationship, we need to take the time to get to know each other. And that means we have to have some margin in our life. I told you that a couple weeks ago. If you're going to pay attention to each other, that means you have to have some time with each other. And not just sitting around, each of you looking at your cell phones, texting each other, or sitting in front of the TV, or sitting at the computer, or, well, we're messaging each other on Facebook. Okay. No, you need some face-to-face conversation. And if you don't have that, you're going to have a hard time finding happy words. You won't know each other. It requires time. It requires attention. And we also have to be in tune spiritually. Words of wisdom applied with discernment require us to know what the Scriptures say. And the experience and the ability to listen and to be able to put it together with discernment to know, how does this apply to this situation now? It requires some maturity on our life. I wanted to say something about if somebody comes and rebukes you, how do you handle that? Somebody has a word of correction for you. How do you handle that? One of the things that Proverbs says over and over again, that fools are the ones who don't accept correction. A wise person is somebody who listens to advice. So a couple verses. Proverbs 12:15. Fools see their own way as right, but the wise listen to advice. Those who hate correction are stupid. Proverbs 12:16. Those who refuse discipline despise themselves, but those who listen to correction gain understanding. Proverbs 15:32. Listen to advice and accept instruction so you might grow wise in the future. Something I've learned is when somebody comes to me with a word of rebuke or correction, and it happens, you have people that come, Pastor, here's what I think we need to do. I think we're doing it wrong. What do you do? Or if somebody comes to you and says, you know what, you need to change here. You're not doing this right. How do you handle that? The best way to handle it is this. You listen to what they have to say and give them the chance to spill it out. Don't be defensive. Just let them say what they want to say. And then let the truth of that kind of flow through your fingers and down into your heart. And everything else, you just let fall to the floor. And then move on. You don't have to defend yourself. Now, there might be a few occasions where you might need to do that if you're being accused of something or something. But often, what I've found is that you can just listen to what the person says. Take the truth to heart. Maybe there's something I need to learn from this. Maybe I do need to grow in this area. But the rest of it, I'm just going to let it fall to the floor. I'm not going to be offended by it. I'm not going to, go back at them. Well, you think I should do, well, here's what I think you should do. Well, that's not going to work, okay? But listen attentively and with respect and learn from it. Because there's usually something, even if the person is wrong, there's probably something that you can learn through the experience. You might grow wise in the future by listening to advice. Well, a timely word. Not only is it an appropriate word, but a timely word. And the two go so closely hand in hand, it's hard to separate them. But here it is, in Proverbs 25:11. Words spoken at the right time are like gold apples in a silver setting. They're like a beautiful work of craftsmanship. Have you ever thought about words as a craftsmanship, like a crafts project, a beautiful one made out of gold and silver? It takes time and effort to craft them just right. So are our words. We ought to craft them wisely. That's why we think before we speak. We ought to really pay attention. And they should be an object, they should be something beautiful and wonderful and something that's going to draw truth out of people. And in 15:23, how good is a timely word? A word at just the right time. It's important not only for the content of the advice to be correct, but it also must be given at the correct time if it's to be effective, says one commentator. Timely. A timely word. My favorite verse on this is Proverbs 27:14. Greeting a neighbor with a loud voice early in the morning will be viewed as a curse. Isn't that good? You know people like this, right? Yeah. Morning people. They're up a little too early, they're a little too noisy, and you want to sleep. That's not going to be a blessing to you. That's going to be a curse. Isn't that beautiful? I love the way Proverbs puts things. It's just perfect. A timely word. There's a right time to say it. And then there's another time where it's just going to be annoying. When you're in the middle of a fight with somebody, there's a lot of things that might be appropriate at another time. Things that might need to be addressed. But it might not be the right time to say it. Remember James? Quick to listen and slow to speak, slow to become angry. Good principles, and similar to what we find here. Here's a little section from Trumper Longman on his commentary, which is pretty good. He kind of pulls together a number of verses. I'm just going to read this to you. These proverbs in Proverbs 25:11-12 emphasize the circumstantial nature of speaking wise words. It's simply not the case that proverbs are effectively or even truly spoken in every situation. You can take a proverb, you can take a verse of scripture, and it can be at the wrong time, or might be used out of context, so it doesn't apply to the circumstances. Wisdom has to be used with understanding and discernment. They help us to know how to apply it. It's sometimes the wise person needs to remain silent. He gives a whole bunch of verses like that. It's only fools who speak all the time without regard for the circumstance and to their detriment. Proverbs 26:7-9. The wisdom formula is to speak the right word to the right person at the right time. Proverbs makes this point over and over and over again. Speak to the right person in the right way at the right time. The appropriate word, the right word. For example, the circumstance and nature of the fool determine whether the wise person should respond to a foolish argument. Sometimes you should respond, and sometimes you should just let it go. How do you know? Well, that's where wisdom and discernment, or knowledge and discernment come in. Sometimes it's appropriate to do one thing, just walk away from the argument. That guy's a fool, he's never going to learn, he's just trying to be argumentative. So he's just trying to make trouble. Walk away from it. But if it's a real issue between you and your spouse, for example, you may at some point want to deal with that issue. You have to have wisdom apply it. That's good enough for that. Proverbs 14:29. Patience leads to abundant understanding, but impatience leads to stupid mistakes. Be patient in your conversation. Wait for the right time. There will be a time, an appropriate time for you to deal with an issue. It may not be this moment, but wait for the right time. Growing up, my sister didn't understand this principle. There were times to ask for things, and there were other times where that would be the last thing that you wanted to do. You would surely, if it's been a long day, things have broken down on the farm, Dad's a little tired, it's the end of the day, my sister, can I do this? And I'm thinking, no, don't ask right now. Don't ask right now. This is not the time to ask. Wait till tomorrow when things are better. You see what I'm saying? There often are just the right time, and then there's the wrong time to ask. And the effect that you will get is just completely different. What I want to suggest to you is that especially in marriage, relationship, and communication, there's something that you should work toward. It's true also for your family, and it's true for relationships generally. Many of you know that in Greek there are 4 basic words for love. There's eros, which is the desire love. And there's agape, which is that sacrificial, looking for the good of the other person kind of love, that rugged commitment to the relationship that refuses to give up, but just you continue to look for the good in the other person. That kind of love. And there's storge, which is the natural affection that you have. You see a baby, oh, isn't he cute? That's a natural affection. Or some people like that for dogs, or it just depends on what you're. But it's the natural reaction that anybody who's not a psychopath would have toward a little baby. If you're a psychopath, then you may not have storge. But anyway, everybody else does. But there's a fourth one. And it's the neglected one, but it is so helpful in marriage and in families and in friendships. And here it is. It's philos, or the verb form is phileo. To phileo someone, to love them like this, is brotherly love. Remember Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love? Well, it comes from the same word. This philos is the love of things that we have in common. It's the things that we share together. That we have something in common with each other that gives us a bond toward each other. And it makes us like each other. It brings a fondness and an admiration toward each other because we like the same kinds of things. And we have shared experiences with each other. So we do things together, common bonds that pull us together and bond us to each other. And so we're fond and we just like to be with each other. And if you have watched couples who've been together for a long time, this is often the love that rises to the top. Agape, we work toward that, but sometimes we're selfish. The eros can come and go. But this connectedness we have to each other, just because we do stuff together, we have so many common things together, pulls us together and takes us through the most difficult things that we experience. It's a beautiful thing. It is the friendship love, the brotherly love, the thing that flows from what we have in common. You ever read the book A Severe Mercy? You should read it sometime. Sheldon Van Auken wrote. It's a love story, basically, about Van and Davy. And at first they weren't Christians, but they had this idealism about what their love relationship should be. And in the process, they got to know C.S. Lewis. And through him and through his letters and through his teaching, they both became Christians. And it's the story of their conversion as well as their love story. It's a beautiful story. But the reason I bring it up is because this point is made so well in the book. Even before they became Christians, they came up with this idea of the shining barrier. This idea that if we have enough things that we have in common, it will be the barrier towards selfishness which splits us apart. So we want to get to know each other as best we can and do as much together as we possibly can, because that will bring a bond to one another that can't be separated by selfishness. And so an example of what they did, one of the things they did was they said, if you read a book and you thought it was a good book, then I'm going to read that book. If you like Mozart, I'm going to learn to like Mozart. If you like sports, I'm going to learn to like that sport. If they tried to find what the other person liked to do, and then the other person learned to like it. Because they said, there's got to be something likable in what you like. And so I'm going to try and figure out what that is so that we can do things together and we can understand each other and have as many common bonds as possible. What were they building? Even before they knew what they were doing, they were building philos. They were building a connectedness in the things that they shared with one another that brought fondness and admiration and just this beautiful friendship. We ought to do that in our lives. And how are we going to do that? We got to get off the phones. We got to get off the social media at least long enough to spend some time looking at each other and having a conversation. And again, I'm not against Facebook and Twitter and all those things, but don't let them take away conversation from your life. Spend time doing things you like to do. Remember I told you about how Dad and I used to go down in the basement and hit the ping pong ball back and forth? We did it almost every night in the winter. And that's where we had conversation. We never kept score because we're too busy talking. That's philos. It's building connection through a common activity. Do it in your marriage, and you will communicate better. Because when you're fond of each other, and you like being together, and you like doing things together, guess what happens? You like talking to each other too. And you have common things to talk about. Things that you both like and both enjoy. And if you can learn to talk at that level, often it opens up the doors to more difficult conversations. But you have to have something to build on before you're ready for those difficult conversations. Does that make any sense to you? I hope so. So, philos, build it into your life, because it will enable you to find the timely words and the apt words that will help you. Well, let me just finish this up as quickly as I possibly can. A wise word. You always want to be going toward saying something that's wise, something that is wise. And there's so many verses on this, I can't even begin to give them all to you. But let me just give you a few. Proverbs 8:11 tells us that wisdom is more precious than rubies. Nothing you can desire can compare with it. The teaching of the wise is a fountain of life, turning the person from a snare of death. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. An understanding mind gains knowledge. The ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Now, there's all kinds of words that would not ever be wise. I'll just give you a short list here. Unwise words, according to Proverbs, would include jealous words, lying, deceitful words, dishonest talk, false witnesses, slander, flattery, prideful speech, boasting, bragging, impatient words, offensive words. I like this one. Gushing with stupidity. Hot-headed words. Words from a short-tempered person. And there's a lot of those verses. I'm just giving you a few. Hateful speech. Angry words. Contempt. And what I told you before about philos, the thing that will keep you from contempt is the fondness that comes from philos. When you like each other, you don't have contempt for each other. You don't call each other names. You don't look down your nose. You don't lose the respect for each other that you ought to have. Treacherous words leading to violence. Words that lead to disgust and scorn. Words that produce conflict and destroy. Gossip, unfriendly bickering, insult, accusations, revengeful words. I'm sure I'm missing a few, but just in going through Proverbs, here are some of the things that the proverb writer said, these things are not wise. These are things that will get you into all kinds of trouble. Avoid these kinds of words. This is wisdom for you. So what kind of things are wise? Humble words. 1533. Discerning words. Pleasant speech. Wholesome speech. 1514. Insightful words. Let your words be filled with insight. Words with integrity. Wisdom comes from many counselors. It says in numerous texts like 24:6. Truth is always wise. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a minute. And remember, like we saw last time, we often we're easily self-deceived about our words. When we speak, it's very easy for us to twist things, and especially in regards to motivation. We think we're speaking truth, but somehow it gets a little twisted sometimes. A sensitive word turns back wrath, but an offensive word stirs up anger. Learning to listen empathetically, thinking about how this answer will be received. How to word it so that it will be received with wisdom. Sometimes it's not what you say, but how you say it. If you come at it filled with pride and arrogance, or with an accusing attitude, it will fall on deaf ears. But if you come with humility at the right time, you may be able to make a breakthrough. Does that make sense? Be sensitive to the other person's feelings. Wisdom of encouraging words. A good word encourages, says Proverbs 12:25. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Peaceful words. There's joy in bringing peace. Proverbs 12:20. There's wisdom often in ignoring an offense. Sometimes you just drop it and let it go. Insightful people restrain anger. Their glory is to ignore an offense. Often wisdom provides guidance to our life. Somebody speaks into our life, says, you know what? This is what you do. I think you should think about this. The righteous offer guidance to their neighbors, Proverbs 12:26. The ear that listens to life-giving correction dwells among the wise, 15:31. Advice comes from the deep waters of the heart. Those with understanding can draw it out. There's wisdom deep down in our heart. Wisdom of gracious words. Gracious words are pure. Those who love a pure heart, their speech is gracious. Good news strengthens the bones, 15:30. Good news is like cold water for a weary person. You need somebody who brings good news to people. Wisdom in all of this. Pleasant words, my last category. Pleasant words are flowing like honey. They're sweet to the taste and healing to the bones. A tender tongue can break a bone. And that is just an interesting little verse. Again, by saying something sensitive to the person, instead of accusing them or getting mad at them or angry with them, sometimes just that tender, sensitive, kind word that you say is what breaks the bone. It's more powerful than anything. Is it not true? How you say it is often where wisdom is found. The appropriateness and timeliness of the word is often determined by the tone and attitude in which it is given. Wow. So many good things that you can say here. Let me make this, I think I should say this. Better a dry crust with quiet than a house full of feasting with quarrels. A pretty good verse. Other places, a contentious wife is like a constant dripping. So love that. But notice this, an insightful wife is from the Lord. Often your wife has insight. You want to listen. Remember the Proverbs 31 woman? Woman of excellence and character. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. How do you handle conflict in your marriage? Well, let your conversation show respect and honor to one another. Speak from that place of fondness and philos, not from a place of anger and contempt. If you don't respect and honor each other, you're not going to have a good conversation. It's honorable to back off from a fight, but fools jump right in. Proverbs 23. So know the right time to talk. Apt, timely words. Starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam, so drop the matter before a dispute breaks out. So you deal with issues before the dam breaks, in other words, as best you can. You don't, remember that, was it Oroville where they had the dam that was just about broke wide open because they didn't do anything about the problem until the last minute? Well, the same thing happens in marriages. If you don't deal with the issues on the front end, eventually the dam breaks and you have a mess on your hands. So deal with it as quickly as possible, if not before, when things have cooled. And sometimes you need to find a mediator when you come to an impasse. And don't underestimate the power of praying together. Remember what I told you a couple weeks ago? That the surest indicator that if a couple is going to stay together, according to studies that have been done, is that they pray together. It was like less than 1% led to divorce in this one study that was done. It's fascinating to me. So, apt, timely, wise words. We all need them. And we all ought to be people that are growing in wisdom, growing in the knowledge of God, growing in the understanding of Scripture, and able to help each other out so that we have something that we can speak into each other's lives. My life has been changed by the power of people who've spoken good and timely words into my life. And so can yours be. Don't despise counselors and those who come to you, but find advice And find people that you can have a relationship with that can speak truth into your life. And apt, a timely word. You don't have to always say, sit down, shut up, and leave it alone. There is a time to speak. A time to speak wisely, timely, apt words. Let's pray. Lord, there's so much here, and I just pray, give us strength as we seek to be people that listen well, think before we speak, and then speak apt and wise words when we're given the opportunity. Just enable us to do that, Lord, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, if we're going to do it, we're going to need His strength. So we're going to sing a song about that. Lord, we run to you.